right here. Hello, welcome party people to Office Hours, the live stream where I take your Microsoft database questions and maybe answer them, at least give it my best shot at answering. Now, it's a Monday morning and I am hungover. We went to a wedding last night and I can't make it more than like 4 hours worth of partying these days, and I was totally shot. That's a bad sign too, because Saturday night we're supposed to go to Bruno Mars' Pinky Ring Room I think it's in the Bellagio. It's supposed to be this really legendary new live music club where Bruno Mars drops in from time to time. I don't know how, I'm going to be really curious to see how long I might make it. We're going with some people who party a whole lot harder than I do. So we'll see how I'm able. I'm old. I'm like old now. So let's see, your top voted question from over on PollGab comes from VegasDBA, who asks, I love the always on availability group episode. You know, it's funny, just as a side note. So where that came from was I had to do a certain number of TikTok lives. And so what I did was I went back through my old presentations and I found a bunch of stuff that I could, or not a bunch of stuff, but a few presentations that I could talk through without having slides on the screen, like talk through concepts. And so that worked out, I thought, pretty well. We'll see. I'll do a couple more of those just as an off-the-cuff random oddball things. So VegasDBA continues, you mentioned how awful the dashboard is for monitoring. Can you recommend any scripts, custom alerts, or dashboard to keep a better eye on things? Yes. Third-party monitoring tools. I beat this drum a lot. I don't care which one you use. I don't care if you use one from Quest, Idera, Redgate, SolarWinds. Use somebody's monitoring dashboard. Always on availability groups is so complex. There are so many moving parts, and you don't want to try to roll your own. There's nothing out there free that's even close. Go get a paid monitoring tool. And the way that I tell it with my clients is, you're spending $7,000 a core for Enterprise Edition, because usually with availability groups, that's what most shops are doing. $7,000 a core for Enterprise Edition across, say, 16, 24 cores. That's so expensive. Now get a dashboard for $2,000. Not having monitoring software on your Enterprise Edition always-on availability groups is exactly like buying a Ferrari but saying, you know what, I want to save a little money. Don't put the dashboard in there. Don't give me any gauges, don't give me any alerts, don't give me a check engine light. I'll just figure things out myself. That would be idiotic. Who in their right mind would do that? It wouldn't make any sense. And so that's why it really helps to keep the perspective of the finances in there with the total cost of the licensing whenever you're doing always on availability groups. Oh, I see Ken Block is here. Howdy, Ken. Next up, we have SteveTV asks, are there any tools or utilities to manage source control for SQL Agent job definitions? I haven't seen one. If you wanted to start rolling your own, the place that I would probably look is dbatools.io. dbatools.io is a PowerShell framework that you can use. One of the many things that it does is helps you migrate from one server to another, one SQL server to another. So it has stuff to copy settings, for example. You could try to integrate source control into that somehow by scripting out the jobs on a regular basis. But there's nothing built into SQL Server that will trigger as soon as a change is made to an agent job, immediately trigger a change to go into source control. So you just have to be aware that people can make changes and they won't get reflected in source control. Next question comes in from TikTok. Shaw256 asks, how do you feel about MongoDB? Is there ever a reason to use it over SQL Server? Yes. If you're storing like JSON documents or XML documents, and all you're doing is saying, here's a key value, like maybe a customer ID or a part ID, go get me everything about that one customer or part, and that whole entire customer parts document is all stored inside a JSON or XML. I think it makes much more sense to use something like MongoDB than it does with SQL Server. Now, what ended up happening with every NoSQL database like MongoDB is that they realized in order to be competitive, they have to add in relational support, they have to add in SQL support. So all those databases are gradually, slowly trying to climb their way back into having equivalent capabilities of relational databases. So they'll immediately pipe up and say, well, no, we're just as good. We got everything else. But I'm less interested in that. I'm more interested in the business use case where you're very specifically just dumping big documents into something that you want to do as a database, although I would also say you should consider a file system too at that point as well. Next up from PolGab comes in JoseDBA. JoseDBA asks, what metrics should I ask should I show my boss when I'm asking for a new DBA in my team? That's so interesting. He says, we're 3 people. We manage around 180 servers with over 3,000 databases. The thing that I would show them is, first off, go run SP Blitz, my totally free health check for SQL Server. Run that across your 180 servers and look at the number of like priority 1 warnings that you have. I kind of jokingly say that anything between priority 1 and 49 are the reasons why DBAs get fired. But go through that list, and if you don't even have enough people to run SP Blitz across all of your 180 servers, that's also a sign for you as well. But you put together that inventory of the most mission critical problems and then just share that with your boss and say, okay, here's the deal. We did a quick health check across our 180 servers. I got this many databases that aren't being backed up. I get this many databases that aren't that have corruption. I have this many that aren't being checked for corruption. I have this many that are behind on patches. Tell boss, I'm going to give you this health check. I'm just going to give it. We're going to talk through it orally first. Then, when we're done talking with you orally, I'm going to put it in writing and I'm going to forward it to you via email. And I'm going to say, here are the concerns that I've got about my environment. But let's have a discussion about it first. Whenever you put stuff like that in writing, it makes managers freak out, which can be either a good or a bad way. But what you're doing, or good or bad thing, what you're doing is covering your behind, saying, this is how bad I know the environment is. I can't sleep at night because of these problems. Then often when your boss gets that in writing, they can't sleep at night either, and it makes it very easy for them to forward it up the chain of command, and it opens up those conversations with, well, what would you need in order to solve some of these issues? And that's where the extra staff person comes in. Now on the flip side, if you don't unearth any problems and it looks like everything's okay in your environment, you don't have any priority 1 through 49 issues on your 180 servers, you might have a situation where the environment's very stable. You've got an automation working out really well in your favor. And in that case, you might not need more DBAs. The only thing that I would say is if the next step would be to run SP Blitz backups, which will tell you how much data you'd lose in the event of an outage. That way you can start assembling RPO and RTO numbers. That also scares the hell out of management once they see how much data they could lose and how long they could be down for. Next up, also from JoseDBA asks, how do I keep server level objects in sync when using availability groups? Is dbatools the best option? Oh, Chase Story, welcome to the club. Is that the best option? So for me, I stopped working with availability groups around 2017 when Microsoft started struggling with the SQL Server availability groups on Linux type thing. There just hasn't been that many diagnostic tools or mechanisms put in. So because I stopped working with it, and I haven't seen any good tools out there, unfortunately, I don't have a good answer for that question. That hopefully in the comments someone will chime in if there is a good option. My hunch is that there just isn't one out there today. Jonathan Cahias used to have one, a guy who works with SQLskills.com, used to have one, and he never maintained it either, so I don't think it's too current today. Kevin says, cool Anthony Bourdain poster. It's so funny. So this is an original painting by Cassie. It's fastened really hard to my wall, or else I would bring it closer. And so, funny story there, I was doing a webcast at one point for a big software vendor. And the software vendor said, we were getting ready to start the webcast, and the camera angle was just like this. And the software vendor was like, okay, just one thing first. We need you to take that down off the wall. And I was like, this is my same background looks the same across all my webcasts. What do you mean we're about to start and you want me to start rearranging the background? They said, well, it's just not really appropriate for a corporate webcast. I said, okay. And then I went to go try to pull it down, and I have no idea how the heck I mounted that thing to the wall. I think I used like 3M command strips and Velcro maybe. I went pulling and I could not get it off. I was like afraid I was going to damage the wall or the painting. So that painting is not going to move through my entire lifetime of having this house. As long as I'm in this house and doing streams, that's that's always going to be in that exact position. Because I kind of would take that down just because for some like corporate webcasts or whatever, but now I don't have a choice, which I kind of think is very Anthony Bourdain too as well. I think that's the kind of thing he would have liked. Oh, someone says over in, I gotta switch glasses so I can see the monitor better from here. Kevin says you could use the blur background function in the future. That's actually a really good idea, especially because Zoom has that built in. They weren't using Zoom, but that's actually, I could get a camera filter app and do that pretty easily. That's a really good idea. Richie says, but Brent's house got a Bourdain painting. And we have two. We have two from Cassie Ott that I really love those paintings. They're really cool. All right, next question. This is actually house related. Someone in Polgab named Elon says, why don't you own an electric car? Okay, so I can't stand Teslas. The value proposition isn't there for me. I think that they're really... Interiors are heinous. They're really gross places to be. They're very stripped down. I think the exteriors are actually gorgeous, except for the Cybertruck. But I think the Teslas are some of the most timeless styled cars that are out there on the road today. But I really have no interest in owning one because they don't really have a soul. The interior is so generic. But I got really excited when Porsche announced that the Boxster, the 718, was going to be electric. That comes out next year. So I started working with my electrician here at the house. I mean, he doesn't live at the house, but the electrician who's done work here to put in a Porsche, the equivalent of a Tesla supercharger here at the house. And because my neighborhood is about 25 years old and the power is absolutely maxed out, like everybody poured in pools, they did hot tubs, multiple air conditioners. The electric capacity for my neighborhood is completely gone. So there are like, I think 3 people in the neighborhood who have superchargers, but there's not enough electricity left at the transformer level. So for me, not a single house in our neighborhood can add an electric car charger. The only way that we can do it is to spend $40,000 upgrading a transformer and running new lines to one of our houses. Whichever neighborhood pulls whichever neighbor pulls the trigger on that first eats the cost for that. And then the rest of the neighbors immediately around them will be able to get electric cars. But because of that, it's just it for me. But I want a Porsche 718 Boxster when they come out with the electric version. I just won't be able to charge it here at the house, which kind of blows. We're looking at new houses to try and get some more garage space as well. Simon says, I lease an electric car. If I'd have bought it outright, I'd be 18,000 pounds worse off right now. Yeah, they do have a serious depreciation problem. I'm curious to see, Porsches do too, the Porsche Taycans. Unbelievable. They drive right off a cliff. You know, the values drop like a stone. You can get a Porsche Taycan for like half the cost of a new one these days, which is pretty crazy. Next up, MyTeaGotCold, always good to hear from, says, when I'm writing a new stored procedure and I get a compile time syntax error, the error's line number is always wrong. What's the trick? If you have dynamic SQL, there is no trick because with dynamic SQL, the code starts again at the first line of wherever your dynamic SQL is because it's a string that you're building and then executing that string, which gets compiled separately. If it's not dynamic SQL, check the top of your code. Like very often people will do an SSMS window with a bunch of stuff and then they'll say create or alter stored procedure. Like they'll have comments up there or begin tran or some other garbage like that. Take all that garbage out, do your create or alter as the very first line in your SSMS window, and then you should be okay. But that's the first place I'd start. Next up, let's see, Sigurður asks, should SQL Server or SQL Server DBAs be required to know how to create the underlying infrastructure like VMs, clusters, or disks, or is this a unicorn trait? So generally, it depends on how big of a company that you're at. If you're at a small company in a small IT team, you're typically a jack of all trades or a Jill of all trades. You have to know how to do everything, plus you fix printers, you fix desktop computers, whatever. But the larger the company becomes, the more removed you become from the underlying infrastructure. And I'll give you an example. One of the giant financial services companies that I work with, tens of thousands of employees. In that team, the SQL Server DBAs don't have Windows access. They can't remote desktop in. They don't have Windows cluster access. So when they want to go troubleshoot a server, for example, if the cluster's down, they simply open a ticket and send it over to the clustering team. There's a Windows clustering team that manages all of the Windows clusters. The cluster has to come up before the SQL Server team even gets involved. And then once they get involved, if the service doesn't start, if for some reason the SQL Server service can't start, they kick a ticket over to the Windows team, and the Windows team is responsible for getting services to start. So obviously in an organization like that, they don't know anything about the underlying VM, cluster, disks, whatever. So there's just all kinds of different DBAs. Next up, happydba asks, what happened to groupby, the online conferences? They were great. That's a great question. I actually passed that off to a group of other volunteers, Blythe Morrow, Daniel Hutmacher, and Aaron Nelson, I believe. They picked it up and ran with it. They did a couple of versions of it, and then it kind of tapered off during the pandemic. People got the Zoom burnout during the pandemic. It's weird. People don't want to sit in online meetings, like live online meetings anymore. The attendance for those has dropped down dramatically. But you know what actually picked up is stuff that's like live streaming on TikTok or Twitch. For some reason, those do a whole lot better. Oh, I just got a reminder that I was supposed to call somebody. So it's, and also short form videos do really well. Short form stuff that's like 60 seconds to 90 seconds. Simon says over in the chat, I'm still hoping SQL Cruise will come back. It's really funny. I'm actually working on a variant of that. It probably won't hit until at least 2025, but I'm working on a variant of that. Won't be focused on SQL Server this time around, but it'll be focused more on people who are consultants or freelancers who want to get together and share strategies for things like marketing, building businesses, and so forth. Sort of a combination of a mastermind group plus education aboard a cruise. So, because I'm actually going on a cruise in a week and a half, going to Alaska, and just always adore that kind of thing. Another question came in via TikTok. Let me scroll back to that. AppleUser says, how do I convince my security team that I don't want to run EDR on our SQL Server cluster? I don't know what EDR is. I'm guessing that that's one of those security tools that traces everything that happens on the box. Security teams have a habit of just wanting to check boxes. They just want to install software that says it does a job, kind of like the CrowdStrike thing. And if that's done at the company level by the security team, like they say, we're going to do this everywhere, you generally don't have a choice. So the one thing that I will say when I work with security teams is, okay, you want to add overhead on the SQL Server, just so that we're all on the same page. You're going to install something that tracks stuff that requires power, that requires CPU power in order to run. I need my people to be on the same page that if queries go slower, you, the security team, are going to pay for additional CPU power to deal with that overhead. Are we on the same page there? And then that's when they'll usually freak out and be like, no, it's not going to add that much overhead or whatever. And we have to talk through that and make sure that they get that it will, because it will. If they say that it won't, I'll say, great, let's do a proof of concept. We're going to run a series of load tests, then we're going to put EDR on, whatever app it is that you're using, and then run it again and see what the difference is between the two. You may already have your servers be so overpowered that it doesn't matter, but if you find out that it does matter, then there you go. Next up, Bandhu asks over in Polgab, for Azure SQL VMs, is large memory or fast disk more of a dollar premium? One of the cool things about all the cloud providers is that you can just go look at their pricing. It doesn't say call for information, just go look at their pricing. So go look at their pricing, Bandhu. Ninja says, I'm struggling getting SSMS to connect my on-premium SQL server to our Azure Blob Storage. Any advice? I'm not a fan of doing that. I'm not a fan of going across networks directly to Azure Blob Storage. You're probably running into security or firewall issues, but even when you get it to connect successfully, you're going to run into performance issues. What I would always much rather do is stage things like backups locally, assuming this sounds like you're probably trying to write backups out for disaster recovery. Write the backups out to a local network share. I don't mean something that's on the same box. I mean a fast network server that's sitting inside the same data center. Then do a file sync to copy those backup files up to Azure Blob Storage. The reason you're going to really care about that is that if you need to do a restore, you want that restore to happen as quickly as possible. And fetching backups from Azure Blob Storage across your internet line is the opposite of as fast as possible. Next up, Panagiotis says, we're currently on SQL Server 2019 and we're using log shipping for high availability and disaster recovery. Is it wise to simultaneously migrate to 2022 and availability groups, or should those be two separate upgrades? That's a great question. I like to think that every time we change SQL Server versions, we should really rethink our entire high availability and disaster recovery models, or strategies, because think of every HADR method as being deprecated in every version. It's not, but the fun way of thinking about that is you get to wad up your paper and start again from scratch on how you design things. Because often there are better options out there, like in terms of availability groups. I actually would tackle both of those at the same time, because when you migrate over to 2022, you don't want to go put in AGs later. You want to do all your testing before your 2022 servers go live. And the only way to do that is to do it ahead of time before you move over from 2019 to 2022. Let's see here. Oh, this is weird. JerseyDBA asks, as someone who is younger, at 30 years or more away from retirement, what's the most important thing you think a DBA can do to future-proof their career? That's a really interesting question. For me, I think your best bet is learning performance tuning. Now, of course, anytime you hear advice from somebody, you got to know that they're biased. And so in the case of me and my biases, I sell performance tuning classes, right? So of course, you would think it's in my best interest to tell you you need to know performance tuning because I'm going to sell more classes, right? No, it's the opposite. I sell performance tuning classes because that's where I think the future is and has been for the last 10 years. I don't teach availability groups training. I don't teach backup training or configuration training or cluster training. Because these days, the ways that you do high availability and disaster recovery, that's managed more and more outside of SQL Server. It's managed by, say, platforms, like how EC2, some of the high availability for things like VM protection and disk protection is managed by Amazon for you. The nice thing about learning performance is that you can save your company money if you can get your VMs to run on less horsepower, or if you're using platform as a service databases, if you're using Azure SQL DB, managed instances, Amazon RDS. If you can cut the CPU and memory requirements, you will save your company money immediately, like on their very next cloud bill. If you save the company money, you demonstrate your worth, and that's how I make a living, doing performance tuning as well. Related question comes in from Dopinder. What complementary AI skills should SQL Server and Postgres DBAs be learning? I don't think that you need to learn AI skills as much as you just need to try to use AI. I don't care whether you use Google's Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude, whatever, but put a window up on your desktop, and anytime you either prepare to do a task or think you're done with a task, go get the AI's opinion. We do this all the time. So Richie and I, Joris over in the chat here, Richie and I constantly use ChatGPT for stuff. Eve, my partner, uses ChatGPT all the time for things as well. So like anytime I'm getting ready to start a blog post, consider writing a query, I'll go ask ChatGPT, what are the things that I should keep in mind while I do this task? Or when I'm done with a task, like if I need to rewrite a query, I'll say, hey, tell me what this query does, explain it to me, and are there any problems that I should look out for? Are there any potential security issues, performance issues, reliability issues that I should look out for? And it's just great to think of it as peer programming or peer project management. It's really useful for that. Do you need to know how AI works in order to do that? Not at all, but it's just fun to use it as a tool. Same thing as Excel. Or you use Excel probably on a daily basis, maybe weekly basis. Do you need to become an expert in Excel? No, you just need to use it. You don't have to learn how the sausage is made, so to speak. And then we'll do one more question. Simon asks, hi Brent, I love reading all your posts about career progression. Oh, great. How much time do you have to spend writing posts to keep your blog fresh? On BrentOzar.com, I publish 3 blog posts a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. There's some weeks that I go above and beyond that, like today's a Monday, I happen to have a blog post go live. In order to produce 3 blog posts a week, some of them are extremely easy. For example, I have who's hiring in our market right now. I just copy paste that for every month. Those are written all the way through 2025. That takes me 90 seconds in order to write that post. Other posts, every time I do an office hours like this, I upload it to YouTube. I put the questions in a blog post. That's also relatively easy for me to do in the sense that I don't have to do a lot of prep work. Like I've been streaming now for 30 minutes or so. So it's going to take 30 minutes to do the stream. It takes another 30 minutes to go back and check where the TikTok questions came in and like mark those in time. So in all, you're talking like maybe an hour and 15 minutes to write that blog post. And then some of the other blog posts are all over the place. Some like tutorial blog posts take me 30 minutes. Some of them, like the query exercises series, often take me 2 to 4 hours in order to write the challenge post and the answer post. So I'd say on average, I spend about 1 day a week writing blog posts when I'm writing them. Then from time to time I get them all queued up. Like right now I have blog posts queued up for the next 2 months. So I don't have to write blog posts for a while. I do that because I'm getting ready to go on vacation. But when I do write blog posts, it's usually about a day a week. All right, so that is a good run of questions from office hours. Hope that y'all had fun and learned something. I smell food in the house. For the last like 6-7 minutes here while we've been talking, I have progressively smelled more and more food in the house. Eve is warming up something and it smells amazing. I do have to say, we probably haven't cooked anything at home in probably 2 months. We've been on a restaurant bender lately, bringing all kinds of leftovers home, but she's warming up something that smells amazing, so I got to go find out what that is. The rest of y'all are on your own. Hope you had fun, and I will see y'all at the next office hours. Adios.